the windshield was gone. Half of it, anyway. Shattered inward, spiderwebbed across the passenger's seat, snow pouring through the hole like the storm had finally found a way inside. A woman sat pinned behind the steering wheel of a rental SUV, blood running down her temple, her breath coming out in clouds that vanished instantly in the -30 wind. The vehicle had slid off Highway 11 somewhere between Hearst and Coppiscassing, rolled once, and come to rest nose down in the drainage culvert, tilted at an angle that made the doors useless. She couldn't move her left leg, she couldn't feel her fingers, and the heater had died 6 minutes ago. 14 kilometers north, a boy on a snowmobile was hauling firewood through the dark. He didn't know her name, he didn't know what she was worth, he didn't know that by morning his entire life would be different. But that's not where this starts. To understand why that night mattered, you need to understand what Jonah Redbird woke up to every single morning. Wabigoon Lake, Ontario. Population 15,400 on a good year, and there hadn't been a good year in a while. The pulp mill closed in 2016. The co-op grocery followed 2 years later. Now the nearest place to buy milk was a 40-minute drive south on a highway that didn't get plowed until noon. Jonah lived in a pale green bungalow on Aspen Crescent with his grandmother, May Redbird. 71 years old, Anishinaabe, retired teaching assistant with a bad hip and a voice that could stop a moose at 50 paces. The house had vinyl siding that buckled in the cold, a wood stove that ate birch logs like candy, and a front porch where May kept 2 lawn chairs and a tin can of sunflower seeds for the chickadees. Jonah was 14. Tall for his age, quiet in the way that made teachers forget he was in the room, dark hair that fell over his eyes, hands always busy. He carved, small things at first, animals mostly, a loon, a bear cub, a pike with its mouth open. He used his grandfather's tools, the ones May kept in a coffee tin on the shelf above the stove. A crooked knife, a gouge, a piece of sandpaper so old it was almost smooth. His carvings sat on windowsill in the kitchen. May said they were museum pieces. Jonah said they were practice. Every morning, same routine. He woke at 5:30, fed the stove, filled the kettle. May's tea had to be red rose, 2 bags, strong enough to hold a spoon upright. He set it on the table before she got out of bed. Then he layered up. Long johns, flannel, hoodie, parka, 2 pairs of socks, inside boots that were starting to split at the toe. He'd duct-taped them twice already this winter. Before school, he split wood. 20 minutes, every morning, no matter the temperature. May's hip meant she couldn't do it anymore, and the stove ate a cord a month in January. Jonah had done the math. They needed 8 cords for winter. He'd stacked 6.5 so far. After school, he worked. 3 days a week at Ruthie's, the only restaurant left in town. Ruthie Parsons, 58, red-haired, loud, ran the place alone since her husband left for Thunder Bay. She paid Jonah $12 an hour cash to wash dishes, mop floors, and haul garbage to the dumpster out back. On weekends, he trapped, snares along the creek bed north of town. Rabbit mostly, sometimes marten. He sold the pelts to a buyer in Kapassing, $40 for a good marten, $15 for rabbit. Every dollar went into a mason jar under his bed. That jar was for the Lakehead University summer program, architecture and indigenous design. 2 weeks in July. Application fee, travel, housing, materials, total cost $2,200. Most people would $914. Jonah looked at it and kept splitting wood. Here's the thing about Jonah Redbird. He didn't talk about his drawings. He didn't show them to anyone except May. But in a sketchbook he kept in his backpack, the pages were full. Not doodles. Plans. Cross-sections of buildings. Load-bearing walls drawn to scale with a ruler he'd borrowed from the school library and never returned. A longhouse reimagined with passive solar heating. A community center with a green roof and a central fire pit. His art teacher, Mr. Enright, had seen the sketchbook once. Jonah left it open on his desk during lunch. Enright stood over it for a full minute, then closed it carefully and never mentioned it. But that afternoon he slipped a printout about the Lakehead program into Jonah's locker. The deadline was March 15th. It was now February 8th. After his shift at Ruthie's, Jonah would ride his snowmobile home through the dark. The machine was a 1998 Ski-Doo MXZ that his grandfather had bought used before Jonah was born. It burned oil, the track was bald on one side, and the headlight flickered when you hit a bump, but it ran. He'd pull up to the house, kill the engine, and find May in her chair by the stove, wool blanket over her knees, radio tuned to CBC, 2 mugs on the table. Tea for her, hot chocolate for him, the powdered kind from a tin. They'd sit together. Sometimes they talked. Mostly they didn't. May would hum. Old songs, Anishinaabemowin words Jonah only half understood but felt in his chest anyway. The stove would tick, the wind would press against the windows. "You eat?" May would ask. Ruthie fed me. Good. And for a few minutes the cold couldn't touch them. Jonah Redbird didn't have much, but he had his grandmother, his grandfather's carving tools, and a kind of patience that most adults never learn. The patience of someone who knows that every dollar counts, every log matters, every drawing is practice for the real thing. And on the night of February 8th, that patience was about to meet something it wasn't built for. What Jonah found on Highway 11 that night should have made him turn around. Any reasonable person would have. But Jonah was 14, and 14-year-olds don't always do the reasonable thing. It was a Thursday. Temperature had dropped to -32 by sundown, and the wind was building from the northwest, the kind that turns snowfall into a white wall. Environment Canada had issued a warning. May told him not to go out. But they were down to half a cord of split birch, and the forecast said -38 by Saturday. Jonah had spotted a deadfall stand about 9 kilometers north, on the old logging road off Highway 11. Good dry birch, already down, just needed cutting and hauling. "I'll be back by 9, he told May. "Jonah Nana, it's fine, I've done it 100 times. She looked at him. That look. The one that said she knew better but also knew he was right. "You take the thermos." He took the thermos. Black tea with too much sugar, May's recipe for everything. By 7:30 he had the Ski-Doo loaded. A sled hitched behind, chainsaw strapped down, extra fuel can, a tarp. He pulled onto Highway 11 heading north, headlight cutting a shaky yellow cone through the blowing snow. The visibility dropped fast. Within 10 minutes he couldn't see 20 meters ahead. Snow stung his face above the neck warmer, his goggles fogged. He slowed to a crawl, following the snowbank on the right shoulder. He almost missed it. A flash of red, brake lights, dim, half buried in snow. A vehicle off the road, tilted hard into the culvert. Driver's side up, passenger side crushed against the frozen ground. Jonah stopped, killed the engine. In the silence, he heard the wind and something else. A horn, faint, rhythmic, someone pressing it in bursts. He left the snowmobile running and slid down the embankment. The vehicle was a dark gray SUV, rental plates, Ontario. The windshield was shattered on the passenger side. Snow had filled the interior halfway to the dashboard. The horn stopped. He reached the driver's door, pulled, locked. He wiped the window with his mitt and looked inside. A woman, white, maybe early 60s, silver hair matted with blood on the left side. Gray wool coat, expensive looking. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Her left hand was pressed against the horn. Her right hand was in her lap, motionless. Her lips were blue. Jonah banged on the glass. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her head turned. Slow. Like it cost her everything. Her mouth moved. No sound came through the glass. Jonah pulled harder on the door. The frame was bent. He braced his boot against the running board and hauled with both hands. It groaned open 6 inches. Cold air rushed in. The woman gasped. "Ma'am, I'm going to get you out. Can you move?" "My leg." Her voice was thin, broken. "My leg's caught." He squeezed his arm through the gap, felt along the steering column. Her left knee was wedged between the dash and the door frame. The impact had compressed the space. He couldn't shift it from this angle. He needed tools. He needed a phone. He had neither. The nearest house was back in town, 14 kilometers south. The RCMP detachment was in Kapuskasing, 40 minutes on a good day. In this storm, maybe 90. Jonah looked at the woman, at the blood on her temple, the blue lips, the shallow breathing. Hypothermia was already setting in. Another 30 minutes in that vehicle without heat, in this cold, and she wouldn't make it. He made his decision. He yanked the tarp off his sled, slid it through the gap in the door, and tucked it around her as best he could. He pulled the thermos from inside his parka. "Drink this. It's hot. I'm going for help." Her hand shook so badly that tea spilled down her chin. She managed 3 sips. Her eyes found his. "Don't leave me here. I'm coming back. I promise. Just stay awake. Don't close your eyes." He pressed the thermos into her hands, climbed back up the embankment, and got on the ski-doo. 14 kilometers south. In a blizzard. On a machine with a flickering headlight and a bald track, he pointed it toward town and opened the throttle. But what Jonah didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the woman he'd just promised to save owned every logging road he'd ever ridden. What happened over the next 40 minutes is something the paramedics in Kapuskasing still talk about. Jonah drove blind. The headlight cut maybe 5 meters into the white. The trail markers were buried. He followed the snowbank by feel, the slight rise on his right that told him he was still on the shoulder and not in the ditch. Twice the track slipped on ice and the machine fishtailed hard enough to throw him sideways. He held on, kept going. His face was numb. He'd given the woman the tarp, so the wind hit his parka straight on, pushing cold through the seams. His fingers cramped inside his mitts. His toes in those duct-taped boots had stopped hurting 10 minutes ago. That was worse. The engine coughed at the 8-kilometer mark. Jonah's stomach dropped. He'd filled the tank before leaving, but the skidoo burned rich in cold weather. He looked at the fuel gauge, needle bouncing near empty. He had the extra fuel can. On the sled, behind him. He stopped, climbed off, hands shaking so bad he could barely unscrew the cap, poured fuel in the dark by feel, spilling some on his glove. The smell of gasoline mixed with the taste of snow. He got the cap back on, pulled the cord. The engine caught. He kept going. At the 12-kilometer mark, the snowbank disappeared. He'd missed the turnoff to Aspen Crescent. He was in town but couldn't see it. Just white in every direction. Then, through the snow, a light. Yellow, warm, Ruthie's. The restaurant sign, a neon coffee cup that Ruthie refused to turn off because she said it gave the town a heartbeat. Jonah crashed through the front door. Snow billowed in behind him. His face was white. His eyelashes were frozen shut on one side. He was shaking so hard he could barely stand. Ruthie was behind the counter, closing up. She dropped a stack of menus. "There's a woman," Jonah said. "Highway 11, car rolled. She's trapped. She's going to freeze." Ruthie didn't hesitate. She picked up the phone and dialed 911. Then she called Constable Flett at the Wabigoon detachment. Then she called May. "Ambulance is 40 minutes out," Ruthie said. "Flett's coming. 40 minutes is too long." Jonah was already moving toward the door. "Jonah, sit down. She'll be dead in 40 minutes. Ruthie looked at him. At the frost on his face, the shaking hands, the duct-taped boots leaking meltwater on her floor. She grabbed a wool blanket from the back office, 2 chemical hand warmers, and a flashlight. They took Ruthie's truck. 4-wheel drive, studded tires, a plow blade on the front. Ruthie drove. Jonah navigated from memory, calling out distances, watching for the spot where the snowbank dropped away. They found the SUV 12 minutes later. Flett's cruiser was already there, lights flashing blue and red against the white. Flett had pried the door open with a crowbar. He was inside the vehicle, holding the woman upright, talking to her, keeping her conscious. His breath came in clouds. "She's fading," Flett said. "Core temp's dropping. We need to move her now." It took all 3 of them. Flett worked the crowbar to shift the dash. Jonah held the woman steady. Ruthie pulled. They got her free. Her left leg was swollen, possibly broken. She couldn't stand. They carried her to the truck. Ruthie cranked the heat to maximum and wrapped her in the blanket. The ambulances arrived 23 minutes later. The paramedics took over, IV line, thermal blankets, oxygen. They loaded her in, and the ambulance disappeared south toward the hospital in Kapuskasing. Flett drove Jonah home. Didn't say much. Just turned up the heat and handed him a pack of trail mix from the glove box. May was at the door, housecoat, slippers, hands white-knuckled on the door frame. She saw him. She didn't speak. She just pulled him inside, held his face in both hands, and looked at him like she was checking that every part of him was still there. Then she said very quietly, "You're frozen solid, you foolish boy." And then she held him. And Jonah, who hadn't cried since he was 9 years old, pressed his face into her shoulder and shook. May rocked him. Didn't care that he was soaking wet, didn't care that meltwater was pooling on the kitchen floor. She rocked him like he was small again. When he finally pulled back, she put her hand on his cheek. "Your grandfather would have done the same thing, exact same thing." She made him drink 2 cups of tea, changed his socks, wrapped his feet in warm towels, and sat beside him till he fell asleep on the couch by the stove. On the kitchen table, his sketchbook sat open to a page he'd been working on that morning. A community library, cedar-clad, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. May looked at it for a long time before she turned off the light. Jonah went to sleep thinking the story was over. He'd helped someone. She was alive, that was enough. But in the Kapuskasing hospital, the woman was making a phone call, and the person on the other end was already booking a charter flight. The next morning, things got strange. Jonah rode the skidoo to school like always. Same route, same potholes under the ice. But when he passed the RCMP detachment, he noticed 2 vehicles that didn't belong. A black Suburban with Ontario government plates, and behind it, a silver Land Rover with a crest on the door he didn't recognize. A tree inside a circle, green and gold. He slowed down, looked, kept going, not his business. At school, Mr. Enright pulled him aside in the hallway. "Jonah, are you all right?" "I heard what happened. I'm fine. Do you know who that woman was?" Jonah shrugged. "No." Enright opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he just said, "You did a good thing." He walked away. His hands were shaking. That afternoon, Jonah walked into Ruthie's for his shift. Ruthie was on the phone. She hung up fast when she saw him. "Sit down, sweetheart. I can start dishes. Sit." She brought him a plate. Not a leftover sandwich. A full plate. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, corn. The kind of meal she only made for the Sunday special. "Ruthie, I can eat after. Eat now." She watched him. "Jonah, honey, do you know who that woman is? The one from the highway?" He looked up. She said her name was Catherine. Ruthie stared at him for a moment, then turned back to the grill. Her eyes were wet. That evening, a CBC news van parked on Aspen Crescent. A reporter knocked on May's door. Young man, parka, microphone, camera operator behind him. "Mrs. Redbird, we're doing a story on the boy who rescued Catherine Hale. Could we speak with your grandson?" May had never heard the full name. She smiled, said, "Not tonight," and closed the door. But after Jonah fell asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with her old laptop. Screen cracked, Wi-Fi slow, borrowed from the school's equipment loan program. She typed 2 words, Catherine Hale. Her hand went to her mouth. The screen showed a face she recognized. Same silver hair, same sharp features. Under a headline about one of the largest private forestry and land management companies in northern Ontario. Hale Timber. Founded in 1961. 3 million acres of managed forest across the Canadian Shield. Sawmills in 4 provinces. Revenue in the hundreds of millions. And Catherine Hale, 62, chairwoman and majority shareholder since her father's death in 2009. Those logging roads Jonah rode his snowmobile on. Hale Timber built them. May looked across the room at Jonah's boots, drying by the stove. The duct tape peeling, the toes splitting. She sat very still for a long time. She didn't tell him. Not yet, because she didn't have the words. But the next morning, a vehicle was going to pull up to the house on Aspen Crescent, and the person inside was going to change everything. Catherine Hale didn't just survive that night. She made a decision in that hospital bed, a decision her board of directors tried to talk her out of. But Catherine was the kind of person who, once she'd decided something, didn't look back. Before we get to that decision, you need to know who Catherine Hale really is. Those logging roads, the ones that cut through the bush north of town, the ones Jonah used to reach his deadfall stands, the ones every trapper and hunter and snowmobiler in the region depends on. They belong to the woman he saved. Catherine Hale, chairwoman of Hale Timber, third generation. But she didn't inherit the company the way people assumed. Her father told her at 17 that if she wanted the business, she'd start at the bottom. She did. Tree planting at 18 70-hour weeks in the Blackflies. Millwright apprentice at 21. Drove a skidder for 2 seasons. Worked her way through every department over 15 years before her father let her into the boardroom. She grew up in the bush. She knew what it looked like when a town was dying. She'd watched it happen to a dozen communities across the north. Mill closes, young people leave, services disappear, and then the silence. The night of the accident, Catherine was driving alone. She almost never did that anymore. But February 8th was her father's birthday. He'd passed 3 years ago. Every year, she drove to the family cabin outside Hearst to sit in his chair by the window and talk to him. The whiteout hit fast. Visibility dropped to 0. She felt the tires lose grip, felt the sickening sideways slide, and then the world turned over. Her phone launched off the seat and vanished somewhere under the crushed passenger side. Unhable. She sat in the cold, pressing the horn in bursts, feeling her body slow down, knowing with calm clarity that she was going to die on a highway she'd driven 500 times. Then a bang on the glass. A boy's face, snow-covered, dark eyes, steady voice. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" And Catherine felt that boy's hand through the gap in the door, pressing a thermos of sweet tea into her frozen fingers. That's what Catherine told her daughter Margot from the hospital bed. "That boy is what Dad sent me." Saturday morning. 9 a.m. a silver Land Rover pulled onto Aspen Crescent. Every neighbor watched from their windows. A vehicle like that had never been on Aspen Crescent. The door opened. Margot Hale stepped out, mid-30s, dark coat, red eyes. She carried a gift bag and an envelope. She knocked. May opened the door. "Mims, Redbird, I'm Margot Hale. My mother is the woman your grandson saved. May I come in?" May stepped aside. Margot walked into the living room, saw the wood stove, the worn couch, the carvings on sill. She took it all in without a word. Jonah was at the kitchen table, bowl of cereal. He looked up. Margot sat across from him, took both of his hands. "Jonah, my mother hasn't stopped talking about you." She told me her exact words. That boy didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Jonah didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say. Margot opened the envelope. Handwritten letter on heavy cream paper, Hale timber letterhead, green and gold crest at the top. Catherine had established a full educational trust in Jonah's name. Architecture school. Any university in Canada. Every dollar. No ceiling. No conditions. May's hand went to the table edge. She gripped it hard. But that wasn't it. At the hospital, while Jonah was being treated for frostbite in the waiting room, his backpack had been set on a chair. His sketchbook had slipped out, fallen open on the floor. A nurse picked it up and set it on the side table. Catherine saw it the next morning when they moved her to a private room. She opened it. The longhouse with passive solar heating. The community center with the green roof. The library with cedar cladding and floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. Page after page. Precise, measured, annotated in a 14-year-old's handwriting. No formal training. Just observation and obsession and a grandfather's steady hand passed down. Catherine closed the sketchbook and called Margot. "I want to build one of these." Margot set the letter down. "There's one more thing." She reached into the gift bag, a pair of boots, Sorel winter boots, insulated, waterproof, the right size, and tucked inside a handwritten note for the next rescue. "But maybe check the forecast first." C.H. May was crying, not hiding it, both hands flat on the table, tears running down her face. Jonah stared at the boots, at the letter, at the crest he'd seen on the Land Rover, the same one on the letterhead. He looked up at Margot. "Ma'am, I didn't help her because of who she is. I didn't know who she was. I helped her because she was stuck." Margot smiled, fresh tears. "That's exactly why she chose you." 3 weeks later, Catherine Hale came to Wabagon Lake. Not assistants, not lawyers, Catherine herself. Walking slowly, legs still in a brace, leaning on a cane. She didn't announce she was coming. She just showed up. She drove through town slowly, windows down, despite the cold. taking it in, the closed pulp mill, the boarded-up co-op, the school with a tarp over the gymnasium roof that had been temporary for 4 years, the single gas station that doubled as the post office. She'd seen towns like this before. She grew up in one. Her first stop. Ruthie's. She walked in, sat at the counter, ordered coffee and the roast chicken. Ruthie nearly dropped the pot. "Mrs. Hale, I can let me clear a booth. Counter's fine, and it's Catherine." She ate slowly, asked Ruthie about the town, about what happened when the mill closed, about the families that left, the businesses that shut down. Ruthie told her everything. Catherine listened, didn't interrupt, didn't take notes, but Ruthie could see it. That same look, the one that calculates while it listens. When she finished the chicken, she set down her fork. "Ruthie, this is the best roast chicken I've had in 20 years. You're full of it, dead serious, and I want to talk to you about something. But not today." She left a $200 tip on a $14 meal. Ruthie stared at it until the door closed behind her. 1 week later, Catherine called a town meeting at the Wabigan Community Center. Word spread fast. By 6 p.m., the parking lot was full. By 6:30, standing room only. Trappers, teachers, parents, elders. Everyone had heard the story: the boy, the snowmobile, the billionaire in the ditch. Catherine stood at the front. No podium, no projector. Flannel shirt, jeans, cane. She looked out at the room, took her time. "I'm alive because of this town. Because a boy from this town did something most grown adults wouldn't do. So, I'm not here to give a speech. I'm here to tell you 3 things." The room went silent. First, Hale Timber is reopening the Wabigoon Mill. Not pulp, value-added wood products, engineered timber, cross-laminated panels, 60 full-time jobs to start. Local hiring grang. Priority. Benefits from day 1. We break ground in April. Murmurs. A woman in the second row put her hand over her mouth. Second, I'm establishing the Jonah Redbird Community Scholarship, annual, funded by Hale Timber and by me personally, not based on grades, based on one question. Did this person show up for someone who needed them? Silence. People looking at each other. Third, she turned and looked at Ruthie, standing in the back, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Ruthie Parsons. I'm investing in your restaurant, not buying it, investing. New kitchen, bigger space, and a catering contract to feed my mill workers 5 days a week. You get a business partner, not a boss." Ruthie's arms dropped. Her hand went to her mouth. She shook her head. Not no, just disbelief. The room erupted, applause. Someone whistled. An elder in the front row stood up, clapping slowly, then faster. The woman in the second row was crying. The man beside her was crying too. May sat in the middle of the room, squeezing Jonah's hand so tight his knuckles went white. Jonah was in the back row, quiet, overwhelmed. He was 14. He didn't fully understand the scope of what had just happened. But he understood this. The woman he'd saved was saving his town back. After the meeting, Catherine found Jonah sitting on the community center steps. Alone, knees up, breath-making clouds in the cold. She sat beside him, slowly. The cane made everything slow. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Catherine. "My father started with one chainsaw and a borrowed truck, that's it. One person who believed in him, your grandmother, believes in you. Now I do too." Jonah was quiet. "Then, I still have your note." Catherine laughed, a real laugh. "Keep it, put it in that sketchbook. Someday you'll frame it." They shook hands, firm, steady. Not a freezing woman and a frightened boy this time. 2 people connected by the worst night of their lives and the best. That night, Jonah and May sat by the stove, tea and hot chocolate. The wood stove ticking, the wind pressing against the windows. May was quiet for a long time. Then, "Jonah, I want you to remember something. That woman didn't give you anything you didn't earn. You earned it. On that highway, in that cold, with those hands. Nobody handed you that." Jonah nodded. "And when you're grown and you're somebody, because you will be, you find the kid on the snowmobile, and you be the Catherine." Jonah looked at the window, at the snow falling soft and steady under the streetlight. And for the first time, the sky above Aspen Crescent didn't feel like a ceiling. It felt like a door. What happened next wasn't just about one boy or one woman. It was about what happens when a single act of kindness starts a chain reaction that nobody can stop. The mill site broke ground on the first Monday of April. Bulldozers on frozen mud, steel beams arriving on flatbed trucks with Hale Timber's green and gold crest on the doors. The same trucks that used to just pass through Ababagoon on their way north. Now they were stopping. Local contractors got the first calls: electricians, welders, heavy equipment operators. Paychecks started flowing into town for the first time in years. The hardware store on the highway, the one that had been running on fumes, sold out of work gloves 3 times in a month. By October, the mill was running. 60 jobs. Real jobs. The single father who'd been driving 2 hours each way to work at a mine in Timmins, shift supervisor, home every night. The young woman who'd dropped out of college because there was nothing to come back to. Logistics coordinator. She re-enrolled in the winter semester, taking courses online between shifts. Ruthie's expanded into the empty storefront next door. New kitchen, new tables, same hand-painted sign because Ruthie said if the food was made by hand, the sign should be too. She hired 4 more staff. She catered lunch to the mill 5 days a week, 200 meals a day. Behind the counter, she hung a framed photo. Jonah and Catherine shaking hands at the community center. Every new hire saw it on their first day. You see that? That's why we're here. Don't forget it. Nobody forgot. At the end of the school year, the first Jonah Redbird Community Scholarship was awarded. The recipient, a 16-year-old girl who spent every Saturday running a homework club at the community center for younger kids. Nobody asked her to. She just showed up. Jonah presented the award. His hands shook. His voice didn't. And Jonah? He started the Lakehead program that summer. Fully funded. Youngest participant. He stood in a lecture hall full of graduate students and presented his longhouse design with passive solar heating. They asked questions. Real questions. He answered everyone. He was still quiet, still carved in the evenings, still split wood every morning, still folded his blanket with the corners tight the way May taught him. But now, when he rode his snowmobile along the logging roads, he looked up at the Hale Timber signs. Green and gold against the snow. He knew those roads now, and they knew him. Exactly 1 year later, Jonah Redbird got on his snowmobile. But this time he wasn't alone. February 8th, the anniversary. He'd posted a flyer at Ruthie's, one at the school, one at the community center anniversary ride. Highway 11, town to the crash site. Saturday 10 a.m., bring your sled. He expected 20 people. Over 100 showed up. Kids on snowmobiles, parents on snowmobiles, Ruthie on a borrowed machine she could barely steer, laughing, refusing help. Constable Flett on his service sled, lights flashing. Catherine's doctors told her absolutely not. She didn't argue for once. Instead, she followed the ride in a Hale Timber truck with Margot windows down, horn honking, Margot waving from the passenger seat. The weather was perfect. Clear sky, -12. Which in northern Ontario in February counts as mild. Sunlight blazing off the snow, turning the highway into a ribbon of white gold between the black spruce, the same road, the same 14 kilometers. But everything was different. A year ago, one kid rode this highway alone in a blizzard, terrified, frostbitten, not sure if the woman in the ditch was already dead. Today, 100 people rode it together in the sun, laughing. They reached the spot. Right shoulder, kilometer marker 9, just past the bend. There was something new there, a steel post, simple, clean. A small plaque bolted to the front. It read, "On this spot, a boy on a snowmobile reminded us that the most powerful thing in the world is showing up for someone who needs you." Everyone stopped, engines idling, silence. Jonah stood in front of the plaque. Catherine stood beside him, leaning on her cane. Neither spoke. Then Catherine put her hand on his shoulder. Firm, steady. The same grip from the night they met, through the cracked door of a wrecked SUV, but different now, not desperate, grateful. "Thank you, Jonah, every day. Thank you." Jonah nodded. Didn't trust his voice. The ride home was slow, easy, people talking, laughing, Ruthie complaining her hands were cold, Flett's radio crackling in the background. Jonah rode ahead, new boots, same beat-up skidoo. He'd refused to replace it. May said he was sentimental. Catherine said he was stubborn. He passed the mill, smoke rising from the stacks in the morning light. He passed Ruthie's, already setting up for the lunch rush. He turned onto Aspen Crescent Ret. May was at the door, 2 mugs on the table, tea and hot chocolate. He killed the engine, walked inside, sat down. She handed him the mug. Good ride? Good ride. They sat together. The stove ticked. The wind pressed gentle against the windows, and somewhere on Highway 11, 100 snowmobile tracks ran side by side through the snow, pointing north, catching the light. If this story moved you, even a little, I need you to do something right now. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who's having a rough stretch. Someone who needs to be reminded that good people still exist. And if you're not subscribed yet, come join this family. Because we don't just tell stories here. We tell the ones that matter, the ones that make you feel something real. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Have you ever helped a stranger without thinking twice? Or has a stranger ever shown up for you when you needed it most? Tell me. I want to read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.